Alright, so let's get this starting. I'm not really one for introductions or anything, so I'll just go ahead and start the explanation. So we're going to start by defining a function. We're going to call it generator. Very simple, straight to the point. We're going to assign a variable num to 0 inside the function. And we're going to start a while loop, an infinite while loop, and we're just going to yield num and increment num by 1. Alright, so let's this is a generator function that we just defined, so we're just going to start a for loop here, and for I, let's first assign a variable and get the generator back from the function, and we're just going to say for I in G print I. Alright, so this is going to go indefinitely. It's going to take a few moments to run the code. Let's see. Alright, it's going to take some time. Alright. This is unusual. I'll just copy it. Alright, so it's done. I'll go back to the first step and go. Alright, so this, as you can see here, you just follow my mouse along, alright? So this is the global frame of the execution, so keep that in mind. We have a function definition, which is the generator, as you can see, and we assign this to the G variable. Alright, so you can see here G took the value of a generator instance, and that's just what we call it. Why it's called generator is due to the yield keyword inside the function. So this yield keyword, as long as it's inside a function, that function will always return a generator instance on its call. So G is going to be the generator instance that we're going to iterate over. So the first call over here, let's go next. This is the first call. It's going to assign num equal to 0, and then it's going to start an infinite while loop. The while loop will terminate on the first yield it encounters, which is on line 4, and it's going to return the value of num, which is going to be 0. So it's going to return the value of 0. 0 is going to be assigned to I, and it's going to be printed to the screen over here. Alright, now the second call is going to resume from where the first call left off. So on line number 4, where it returned the num, it's going to resume over here. So here there are no more operations to do. We already did the return on the previous call, so it's just going to go over and skip that line to the next one and increment number by 1 over here. So see, it's num equal to 0, and then it's going to increment it by 1. Now let's go next, and then it's going to jump over, because this is an infinite loop, so it reached the end over here. There were no breaks, no return, so it's just going to keep the loop in execution, and it's going to the first line is going to be yield, so it's going to yield 1 and return it to I, assign it to I, and just print to the screen. So this is going to go over and over again. And what the for loop does is actually call next on the variable, which is G. So we can do this by calling G next on G multiple times over here, and we can see it in action here. So next we'll just keep calling until it reaches the yield. So this is basically equivalent to a for loop like this for I in range 3. Call. No, wait. This. I'm sorry. Right, so it's for I in G, print I, and if I is equal to 2, break. So this block of code is equivalent to this. These are 3 function calls, and these are also 3 function calls. But we're gonna call next on it to get that variable. So there is another way to do this, and that is by using the send function. And the send function takes one argument, which is usually none. So this is equivalent to this. This is equivalent to next j. So this, calling next on the function, calling next on the iterator, the generator, is equivalent to the send method of the generator. So you can see here it's going to exactly do the same thing, and we can assign it to a variable to c. And let's actually do it in a while loop as well. As you can see here, a is going to keep taking values from the generator just as a for loop. So as you can see, this, the send function, which is also equivalent to next, is going to be the same as a for loop, but we're just calling send on it. So what does send, what's the difference between send and next? Or what's the difference between send and the for loop? Because a for loop is basically a lot of next calls. So for a for loop for I in variable, just gonna keep calling next on the variable. But what's the difference between a next or a for loop and a send? Well, a send actually does something very, very interesting, and that it sends the argument passed to it back to the generator. So as we discussed, the generator will resume execution from where it left off. So the first ever call will go like num is equal to 0, and it's going to start the loop, going to return the number, and it's going to stop the iteration here and return us the number. And then it's going to, on the next call, it's going to resume execution from here, and this is only one operation on this line, which is the return, and this is going to go over to the next line and continue, keeping all the variable values intact without destroying them like a normal function would do. Like a normal function would, once you call it and it returns you a value, the scope is terminated from the memory, and you cannot use the variables that were initialized in its runtime, during its runtime. And that's the difference between it and the generator. A generator will keep the state in the memory and will keep the variable values. Alright. So what we can do with the send is that while it does give us back a return value from the generator, it can also introduce a value inside the generator body, or inside the generator scope. So basically the generator scope is usually just it's usually separated from the global frame, memory over here. So you see, if I go next, it actually creates a different scope, a new scope for that generator function to run in. And we can have a variable here and a variable here with the same name but two different values. So what happens is we want to introduce a variable or a value inside this scope, the scope of the generator, from the global frame, and we can do this by using the send function. So instead of sending none, let's try sending 1, which is going to give us an error. Let's see why in a moment. You can see here it's a type error. Can't send none value to a just starting generator. So this, what it means is that you cannot send a value back to a generator that was not initialized yet. What initialized means it just went through the first iteration. So it needs to go to go through one iteration first before you can send values back to it. It's kind of initializing the generator, and we can do that by simply calling the send function using a none value, and let's assign this to first iteration. And as you can see here, the first iteration was 0, which it assigned the number to 0 and then started the loop. The loop ended on the return statement or the yield statement, and it assigned the return of this expression here to the first iteration value, which is 0. So let's go back to the first step and see it one by one. So as you can see, this is the first call, and let's do it a bit more slowly. Alright, so this is the first call ever, which is the initialization of the generator. I'm going to call next, we're going to assign the variable num to 0, and it's going to start the loop and then return the value to the expression that called the function, which is this one over here, and it's going to assign it to the first iteration variable. Now let's go next. So let's go to the next step, which is this loop over here, and this loop is basically it's going to keep calling the function, the generator, while sending the number 1 to it. Let's also go next. It's going to resume where it left off, line number 4, and we're just going to go to the next line. We're going to increment number by 1, and then inside the loop, it's going to go back to this line again and return a value and assign it to the a variable we have over here. So now it's going to keep doing this forever. As you can see, a is just going to take different values and keep being incremented. But as you can see, we're not actually using this value here. This one was never introduced inside this function body, so we can actually we can use any kind of variable, and it's not gonna matter to the execution of the generator. And we can see this by printing a. As you can see over here, it did not change. Let's go to the last. Yeah, so you see here all these numbers were printed, and it doesn't matter what I enter here. As you can see, it's just gonna be the same. Numbers are gonna be the same. So how do we use this send variable inside the function here? Alright, so that is by using a variable which is we're gonna assign it to the yield expression or statement, whatever you want to call it, and we can do things with a in here. So let's go back first and see how this is gonna play out. So let's go next. This is the first iteration. Alright, and let's say the generator was initialized. The first iteration variable takes the value 0, and then we're gonna go in here. Alright, so remember the first call ended here. The first call was interrupted here by the yield statement, and it returned the value of 0. And on this line there are actually two operations: the assignment operation, which we assigned a to yield, and the yield operation itself, which is a form of a return operation. So we have two operations, the return and the assignment. On the first call we only did the return, and that's what will happen in any generator. On the first call, it can only return a value. It will not assign a variable to the yield on the first call, because as you can see, we'll get the type error that you cannot call a value on the iteration that we saw earlier in the video. So this is the second call, and in this time we're sending a value back to the generator. So it's gonna go back to the call. It's gonna go back to the function generator, and it's gonna resume from where it left off, which is line number 4. And in line number 4 we had 2 operations, which we did only one in the first call, which is the return. So the next operation is the assignment, and here the assignment is gonna take the value of whatever you send it, which is gonna be this number over here. Usually if you call the function, the generator, with a next with a next call, it's gonna send none back to the generator, just like in here. So next is equivalent to this over here. Send none is equivalent to next j, but here we're explicitly sending a value back, so it's going to resume execution from where it left off and assign this value to a. So this is the next operation, and we will see it here. As you can see, this is generator scope, and a is equal to this number, and then just going to resume execution, and on and on and on and on. And this is actually convenient in so many applications that I'm just gonna make you find out for yourself, because then the video will be too long for first video. We can actually send a. I can send the variable back. Yeah, it's not defined. Let's just send, let's say, 9. This is gonna keep over and over again. So let's check the next function. So let's say a is equal to next g. Alright, so we removed the send, we removed it from here and replace it with the next. We'll see what happens. Let's go first, and let's change this from a to x, so just you're not confused with the a in the outer scope. Let's go to first step and we'll go to next. It's going to be the first call, and we actually do not need this anymore, but let's leave it anyway. So this is the first call, and num is 0. First iteration is going to be equal to 0, first call, and then it's going to be the second generator call, but this time we're just calling next on it. So let's see what happens. It's going to resume from over here, from where it left off in the first iteration, and this time it's going to do the assignment operation first, and then resume with the code, which is an infinite while loop. So let's go next. It's gonna you can see here the assignment operation, x is equal to none, because next just sends back none, because it does not want to send the value back. It only expects a return statement. So I'm just gonna go ahead and end the video here. Tell me if you liked it, and yeah, thank you.